Good morning. Hugh.
You just used the word spiritual comfort.
Pain is spiritual comfort. Hardship is spiritual comfort. See, hardship is the bridge to genius. Yeah. How much pressure you can handle. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So ordinariness is really relative to a comfort zone. Extraordinariness is relative to much less comfort zone. Right. Like walking up a mountain, snow-covered mountain, barefoot. Insane? Some do it. Playing guitar way off the frets. Insane? Some do it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Taking certain yoga exercises to the extreme. Insane? Some do it. Okay. Mm-hmm. 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 Accepting the status quo of what you were given at birth is a comfort zone. Status quo is comfort zone. Comfort zone has nothing to do with spirituality. It has to do with your material circumstance. So you have material comfort and fear of pain and suffering. Understood? It's to avoid the power of suffering. To avoid the genius of suffering. Like the birth experience and the death experience. Extreme, no comfort there. Real love is not comfortable. It's not massaging and buttering a person up. Okay? That's weakening you. Okay? Weakens you. Okay? Taking the edge off you. To have the woman's hands on you or the man's hands on you is to comfort you. Make you feel like a baby. So it could be a problem. Okay? Regression into another state. Okay? Not a state of light, state of darkness, relaxing you into sleep. Be careful of that. See? Already too much sleep, already too much darkness, and too much, let's say, comfort. See? No awakeness, no awakeness, no fierceness, no fire, see? No burn, no creativity. From the inside out. Managing the material plane and manipulating circumstances, what appears to be creative, it's created. It's like moving the furniture around your apartment. No big deal. No genius in that, just pushing things around. The creation has to come from the inside out. And we're talking then about intensity. Not ego, but just intensity from the inside out. Nothing to do with ego. And we're talking about how do you create light. We're not talking about Con Edison light. We're not talking about General Electric light. We're talking about spiritual light. The masters don't believe in those kinds of comforts, actually. They can indulge them, but they don't believe in them. See? They like the way of hardship. See? So they deal with the impossible. See? The impossible for the brain, for the mind, like transcendent wisdom to begin with. Crazy wisdom, yes. Super paradox, super soul realization. See? It's extreme. People find comfort in the body, they speak about the nobody. There's nobody. People find comfort in the self, right? The image. Masters say there's no self, no image. What you're talking about is just masking. People, what you're talking about is masking. You're already masked, and you're always masking even more. Okay? But realization has to do with the unmasking, see? The unselfing, the unthinking, the unminding of what reality is. See, beyond the comfort zone of human being, which is a comfort zone. An extreme comfort zone, actually. So it is only so productive. And really defines what mediocrity is in a dark sense, which means limitation. Good starting point. Good wood for the fire, not a good place to end up. For the truly intensely creative, not a good place to end up. It's not possible. So spiritual practice then is the strategic undoing of the sense of comfort and self-limitation programming. Undoing that, unraveling it, dissolving it, destroying it, opening it up, going beyond that. See? Going beyond self. Yeah. And we hear the term used casually throughout the world, getting out of the box. You're getting out of one box, going into another box is not really getting out of anything. See? Changing boxes is not what the real is about. So it's a radical stepping away. See? It's radical. See? It's shifting straight from the material level to the spiritual awareness of what it is. See? No matter, no energy. See? No time, no space. See? It's more radical. And it is absolutely the opposite of theory. It's realization, practice. And there are effects of that realization. So there are signs to that realization. So you're moving from one state of what we would recognize as material, worldly, comfort, intelligence, right? And something radically other than that. Again, from the inside out. So person that is practicing this, it's not going to be a necessarily easy person to relate to unless you're in the transformation processes. And it's not that they can't act ordinary. Yeah, that's the thing. They can act ordinary, but from an extraordinary level of insight and in-sound, wisdom, perception, and knowing.
One step on the path for a lot of people, particularly Westerners, and one that someone like Chogyam Trungpa has addressed very specifically, is what he calls spiritual materialism, where taking spiritual practice and using that to
materializing it.
Yes.
Yeah, making it another thing, another game, another program. Right. Cloaking yourself in that, masking yourself in that. See, like wearing the robe, so to speak. But having no function relative to what the robe might represent in one tradition or another tradition. Understood? So going beyond appearances is really the point. Radical unmasking. Radical seeing then. Radical hearing. Radical feeling, radical knowing.
And how do you know?
You know. That's what it is. It's not a question. See, so once you're able to understand that there are questions about certain things, and they warrant maybe a response, that's a relative response from the source, but then there's no question about these things. See, you know. See, so you need to know that. You know when you get there. It's like jumping off. Say, well, how do you know what it feels like? Well, you got to jump to know what it feels like. You have to be in the jump. See? As a former parachutist and, with that training, so, it's great to be in the jump. See? It's great to be free falling. It's great. Freedom is great. Physical freedom is great. Some people like speed. They like the almost real freedom thing that comes with motion. We're talking about freedom from gravity at the mental and self thought and mind level.
Mm.
And we're really talking about gravity in terms of cultural programming, which no one is, but everyone is busy being.
And it seems like one of the ways in which we recognize what we're being is to recognize what is beyond that.
If you can recognize that. Say, they don't teach you that at school. See? So you have to come upon that kind of, I guess you might say, cognition by other means than ordinary social conditioning, programming. Okay? But since we are originally spirit souls, we do have an advantage. Okay? So there are moments where certain things show up as, let's say, indications of our spiritual nature, not religious nature. Spiritual nature is different. It's not what you believe in, but what you experience. It's not what you have faith in, but what you know for sure happened to you. You saw it, you felt it. Whether that comes at a critical time of catastrophic, let's say, awakening, as in a wreck of some sort, right? A mishap, or you have a shock, and you awaken, sharpness comes with it. Light comes into perspective then. Become very clear all of a sudden. See? You hear the boom, you wake up. You may be better or worse for it, but you wake up when you hear that boom, right? When you hear the crunch of metal, you wake up. Metal and glass crunching, see? Being crunched, being, let's say, transformed. See, from one form to, let's say, particles. See? You wake up. And it's sad to say that sometimes that's the only time somebody's going to wake up for real. See? When they're hit. See? Shocked. See? So better to wake yourself up. If you know about this process, it's better to wake yourself up. See? Better to work with your consciousnesses to wake yourself up. Some people would refer to hypnotic suggestion to wake something up in themselves, subconscious training. Could be useful. Others need information that comes from, let's say, a more liberated or abstract state for themselves. That could be helpful too. Some need to listen to avant-garde music to get out of their bodies, to listen to something outside of the ordinary of what they may be feeling and living for themselves. So that can be useful. Some can read books and then step out through someone else's experience. So all of these are useful potential closings of the gap between your state of materiality and your state of spirituality, which needs to be realized for real. And then we have native traditions that have all of this mapped out very carefully and clearly for those who have the patience to see what it is. See, and the path of the warrior is what we're talking about. See. But you don't have to go to the prairies, right, and the caves and the mountains to have the mind of a warrior. To undergo the processes of a warrior. It can happen right here. Because we are the potential of the warrior. And as I've said, you don't want to have to go to the physical monastery when you can create a mental monastery.
What is the training process like? Are there similarities for everybody? Or is it an entirely...
Real training is individual. And therefore, when I refer to the books that I've noted, see, over the years, they really reflected the training of the people who were around me at the time. Okay. So they are time capsules of a certain kind of instructional training that was really demanded by the presence of certain individuals. So this is the realization of an individual, uniquely individual process per person, each one actually being their own path, but not because they hear that and then assume that they are their own path, because that path that you're saying is really the path given to you by your blood, and that's not necessarily the path. Mm. That is generally the path to your undoing and your suffering. It's the path of payments and regrets already. So, where you come as an adolescent, conscious of your limitations, right, and the authoritarian sort of situation of culture that you are forced to have to embrace, see, without wanting to do that, without the desire to be sort of, let's say, undone into the results of whatever the education is that you're subject to, hopes to create in your case, see, education, see. And this is part of it. So people must endure that heartache and that bellyache of discipline in order to get to the next stage, which for everybody is different because they're individuals. Mm-hmm. What's the same is, the climb is the same. The climb is climbing, but everyone's experience of it is from their blood. So that's a unique story. Mm-hmm. That's how it should be. Mm-hmm. I was in the military and I loved it for several years because it was an easy system, just to obey. Everything is there for you, Mm-hmm. So it's good for the beginning. And it was when I was in the military that I became much more sensitive to the inner worlds and the spiritual and the, let's say, multi-dimensional facts of our consciousness. Mm-hmm. So if you need the pressure, you discipline yourself for the pressure, because from the pressure comes some heat. From some heat can come awakening. And we're not talking about having a radical spiritual awakening. You become much more awakened. That means aware of certain things that you can do and need to do to get from one point to the other point. Because others will say, who are into the dream, let's say evolution and path, it's all in your dreams. But not everybody is able to see their dreams in the same way that certain people have to see their dreams and do see their dreams. So it's an individual path, and therefore you see when you hear in certain traditions, Native American traditions, which is probably just Native traditions throughout the world, so we all have the same common sense, that you need to find it on your own. So you need to go out to the woods and survive. Say, for 2 weeks or 3 weeks in the midst of animals and hardship conditions, and going out with nothing, but coming back with vision. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's hardcore. So only come back if you have vision. We'll see you when you have vision. In the meantime, goodbye and good luck. So enjoy your life and your death, and hope for better in the future in your case.
I think one of the most important and sort of call it earth-shattering recognitions that I've gone through, that I've experienced in my practice, is knowing for real that it's not the achievement of some level of theory. It's not an idea that finally makes sense.
What it is, you can't speak about it.
Right? It's not even an experience.
It's not unspeakable. Say, really. Yeah. Well, it is and it isn't. No. Say,
well,
so there's no denial of what the reality is. It's really hard to put in words something that is deep and profound. And everyone who has the same experience, let's say, living through surviving a plane wreck or something, they have their own version of it, but they have a reference. They have a really basic reference. Say, but what arises in them is unique to themselves because of their own programming. And so when you have a shock, you have a release. See, a disconnect from your programming. That means you can ascend, you can rise above it. See, it's important to have something going on that enables you to rise above it. Not everybody has the gift, let's say, of music to be able to actually rise above it and enter a different universe. We're not talking about music. The music universe is pretty human. It's gravitational. See, the music world is very, very gravitational. It's all about the gravity and comfort. See, I would call that the darkness of music, because that keeps you asleep. Yeah. And there's more. But there's no more if you don't know more. If you don't know any better, then you're going to be doing what everybody does, liking what everybody likes, and you have no individual difference or creative advantage whatsoever until you recognize that in yourself and you go with it. You follow it through. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It seems like with that comes a certain level of independence and a certain level of isolation, a certain level of responsibility for oneself.
It's all inside your head. That's where the real isolation is. Yeah. You have individual connection to the divine itself, and it's egoless. Always is, and it will only be that, egoless connection. Because what comes from above in this way is really egolessness. What comes from below is what builds ego. And bondage, limitation, and suffering, serious heartache because of darkness and ignorance. In that case, Earth is a purgatory. Earth is purgatory. There's no escaping it. You're here to learn through suffering, so suffering is the way here. So I say that's where the power is, what you make of suffering. And those who have transcended suffering know what suffering is. They had to endure it. That's why I'm happy that I have a path of tragic karma. It's blissful music. So when I play, it's heart, fire, sound. No more, no less. Straight up, and that's it. It's got nothing to do with the rules of music as we know them and the rules of this planet as they exist to keep people in line with comfort zones. This is native. It's from way before, and it's from way after. So when, let's say, in traditions, a person who's been subject to the world feels they have more to learn from, let's say, the monastic. And they approach the monastery, and let's say, we're just using traditional language here, the house of the master, let's say, the residence. And the master says, wow, you look good, but you're done. You're done. You've been done in. That's why you're here. If you weren't done in by what it was that was doing you from your birth, which is namely your blood and your ego programming to become a self, you wouldn't be here. So, in other words, your experience from birth is not enough to awaken you, generally speaking. So then the master's there for the undoing. Are you ready to be undone? See, in the light of wisdom of the ancient spiritual practitioners, right? The masters. Are you ready? See, can you handle it? Are you ready for the pressure? Are you ready for the burn? Are you ready for any form of leaping beyond yourself and your family and your programming, which is not about the people. It's about what that means in terms of programming at the psychic level in your head and in your chest. See? In your limited understanding. Not your awakened, liberated understanding, but in your self-understanding. Your BS understanding. Your fear-based understanding. Music is power. A sacred gift, if you know that much. It's not for self-amusement and entertainment only, or self-aggrandizement. It's to make your ego feel valid or worthy of what? Fame, fortune, so on. It's much deeper than that. The music is about life and death. We're talking about the cry of the soul. First and foremost, cry of the soul. Sound of the crying soul. See? The prayer of the soul, the longing of the soul for freedom and liberation. Music is yoga. It's a form of communion for many people. See, it's the highest yoga for musicians. There's no yoga beyond that, really. So it's karma yoga, it's bhakti yoga, and it's also jnana yoga, all wrapped up, in one stroke of a note. If they'd only know that. So when I say music is a yoga, that's the potential of what it is. So all of the training you get from musical training is not yoga, particularly it's just training, it's preparation. Because if it were otherwise, then we have all the people who play music as enlightened beings. They're not anything near an enlightened being. Actually just sort of like musical monkeys, say, performance machines, which is their first sacred purpose, and that is to perform, to give to others, share. But that becomes their reality, that becomes who they are. It's not a step to higher levels of consciousness. Okay. So they're not using the latter, let's say, a potential, possibility for themselves. Because from the music, you go to, let's say, intelligence, you start to understand through music, right? We're talking about something on the scale of, let's say, classical training, but you don't have to take classical training to have a classical mind. See, it's up here. See, like the monastery's up here, classical intelligence is here, scientific intelligence is here. Okay. Already inside you, but you need to find out where it is. You have to be knocking around in the rooms of your inner consciousness. Hello, where are you? I'm looking for you. Can you give me a clue? Waiting. And then music then is a baby step on the path. In fact, genius is a baby step on the path to what we're talking about. Higher understanding is a step on the path, but you have to go beyond higher understanding to get to the real path. See, the real realization is beyond understanding. So all schools are preliminary. All forms of training are preliminary to this which is beyond that. So, coincidentally, it comes after you've mastered. After you've mastered training, then this can arise, although this can actually arise at any point it chooses to arise, because we're talking about superconscious intelligence. So it can stop you, it can deliver you to a higher plane in a split second, but don't believe that, because it doesn't happen to ordinary people. But it can happen. So you can start out as a musician, a basic guy or woman, girl, and wind up as a yogi, real yogi. It's a person that goes beyond human nature. Person primarily interested in spiritual nature, right, and the peacefulness of the results of spiritual practice. So, higher principles, higher ideals. Right. So you move from the groin level, which is the conflict level. The creating of conflict is from the groin, right? Human birth, human life, human death, with the groin. And you shift as you evolve to the heart level, where it has a whole different kind of process of being human, and it's being spiritually human. And then that brings into play more angelic realities, light realities, which is a theory. For most, you hear it's just words. For others, it's very real. For the spiritualists, it's very real. Spirits are reality, not material. This is partial reality. This is material reality. That means it is subject to transformation. And so is the spiritual reality subject to higher transformation. So the body is not the real you. It's the encased you. It's the incarnate you. Because you are first and foremost a spirit soul. So you enter the body for your time incarnated, and then you have to leave the body. And that's what death is the proof of, leaving the body. Because it was never yours to begin with. So your identity was completely false from the get-go. You believed you were the body. You believed you were the person of the body, and that turned out to be false. The real is that you're already gone from the body. You can never be the body, but you can use the body. It's a good thing to use, properly, spiritually, creatively, you.
One of the foundational and also most repeated phrases here, and one that may be hard if not impossible to get, is that nothing happens. There is nothing. That is the ultimate experience. That is the ultimate realization, is nothing.
That's called God. That's not supposed to comfort you. It's easy to say nothing happened. That's a device used. What's being spoken about is what is called God or deity, highest deity. You can't describe it, so it's just as good as nothing happening. Because it's beyond yourself. It's not like not yourself. It's not a not self. It's beyond yourself. It's not a negative, it's a super plus, huge plus. And we're talking then about the stage of getting beyond thought and word. Most certainly talk.